The phone vibrated across the desk, like it was trying to escape. I stared at the screen, pulse thudding in my ears, a half-written line of code blinking uselessly in front of me. The name glowing back at me was one I hadn't seen in years. Not missed. Not searched for. Not whispered to myself on lonely nights. Home. That was still how the contact was saved. A cruel little relic I'd never bothered to delete. Like keeping a museum exhibit of your own neglect. I didn't answer. I let it ring until the vibration stopped, until the silence rushed back in, thicker now, heavier. My hands were shaking, which annoyed me. I hated when my body reacted before my brain caught up. A voicemail followed. I didn't play it. I already knew the tone it would carry. Careful, awkward, hollow. The voice of someone pretending absence was an accident instead of a choice. Across the room, the heater coughed like an asthmatic dragon. Somewhere down the hall someone laughed. Life kept moving, completely unimpressed by the fact that the past had just tried to knock on my door. I exhaled slowly and leaned back in my chair. They don't get to do this, I told myself. Not now. Not after years of nothing. And definitely not without a reason. 2 years earlier, I disappeared without fireworks. No shouting match. No dramatique goodbye. No suitcase thumping down the stairs. Just a quiet exit from a house so silent it had learned how to erase people. Growing up there was like living inside a paused video. Everything looked normal from the outside. Clean lawn, polite smiles, framed photos, but nothing moved unless it had to. Sound existed, sure, but it never belonged to me. I was the middle child, which in my family meant decorative. My older sister, Blair, was perfection with a ponytail. Athletic, photogenic, permanently glowing. The kind of daughter adults love to brag about in checkout lines. Then there was Nico, the youngest. Loud, messy, adored for simply existing. He could set something on fire, and still be handed dessert. And me? I was the quiet one. The useful one. The one who learned early that being easy to ignore was safer than being inconvenient. When I was 13, I decided excellence might buy attention. I brought home perfect grades. Cleaned the house without being asked. Learned how to cook meals that didn't come from boxes. I thought surely someone would notice. They didn't. Blair got praise for showing up. Nico got rewards for surviving. I got silence. Not loud silence. Not cruel silence. The kind that feels like you're standing behind glass while everyone else lives. Birthdays came and went. Sometimes there was a card. Sometimes not. Once they remembered a week late and acted like that should count. By the time I was 17, I realized something chilling. I could disappear. And no one would come looking. So on my 18th birthday, I ran an experiment. I said nothing. No reminders. No hints. No waiting by the kitchen counter like I used to. Morning passed. Afternoon slid by. Dinner came and went. Not a word. That night, I packed a small bag with the money I'd saved from my part-time job at a second-hand shop. Not enough for comfort. Just enough for freedom. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I walked out like someone stepping off a stage after a performance no one had watched. And here's the part that still makes my stomach twist. No one noticed. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the week after. At first, I checked my phone obsessively. Then less often. Then not at all. The silence didn't hurt the way I expected. It relieved me. I landed in a decaying apartment above a bakery that smelled like burned sugar and regret. The floors creaked like they were keeping secrets. The heater worked when it felt like it. I shared the place with Evan, a friend of a friend with kind eyes and a habit of leaving encouraging sticky notes on the fridge like, "You survived today." Again. It wasn't home. But it was mine. I took a job at a greasy diner where the coffee never slept, and neither did the staff. The cook, Mags, ruled the kitchen like a benevolent tyrant. She once told me, "Anyone who survives this place can survive marriage, war, or both." I worked mornings, nights, doubles when someone didn't show. Hard work meant something there. If you showed up, you mattered. Revolutionary concept. I enrolled in community college and survived on instant noodles, caffeine, and pure stubbornness. I learned how to keep going even when my bones felt tired of carrying me. Slowly, Quietly, I built a life that didn't ask permission. And then, 2 years later, my phone rang. I finally played the voicemail that night. "Hey, it's me," the voice said, hesitant, unfamiliar. "Just a checking in. We were wondering how you've been. Your mom's been asking. Call us back when you get a chance." That was it. No apology. No concern. No acknowledgement that I'd vanished off the face of their world. Just wondering. I laughed. Out loud. A sharp, humorless sound that startled even me. Wondering. Like I was a missing sock. Something didn't sit right. People don't suddenly remember invisible daughters for no reason. I stared at the phone again. The screen dark now, reflecting my own face back at me. Older. Sharper. Less willing to disappear. They don't want me, I realized. They want something from me. And for the first time since I left, that old dread stirred. Not enough to pull me back, but enough to make me curious. Which, in hindsight, was the most dangerous feeling of all. The messages didn't come all at once. That would have been too honest. They arrived cautiously, like hands testing the temperature of water before stepping in. One voicemail. Then a pause. Then another. Then a text that pretended urgency without offering explanation. "Hey, Dad's been trying to reach you. You should call him. No greeting. No how are you. No imsuri. Just an instruction." Somewhere in another life, I would have obeyed without thinking. That girl was trained for compliance. She lived for approval. She would have dropped everything just to prove she still existed to them. But I wasn't her anymore. I set the phone face down and went back to work, even though my concentration was shot. The library's fluorescent lights buzzed like insects trapped in glass. A printer screamed somewhere behind me. A student hovered, panicked, because she deleted a file she definitely had not backed up. Normal chaos. Grounding chaos. By the time my shift ended, I'd convinced myself I was calm. I was wrong. Outside, the air bit through my coat. Early winter had arrived quietly, the way things always had in my life. No warning, just cold. Eli was waiting near the steps, hands shoved in his pockets, his old silver watch catching the light when he moved. "You look like someone just shook a snow globe inside your head," he said gently. "I might have been contacted by a ghost," I replied. He didn't laugh, not immediately. He just matched my pace as we walked, giving me space to decide how much truth I wanted to spill. "They reached out," I finally said. "After years. Like nothing happened." Eli nodded once. "That's unsettling." "That's one word for it." I exhaled. "I think they want something." That got his attention. People usually do. That night, I dreamed about the old house. Not the whole thing, just the dining room. The table was set like always, polished and full. Every chair occupied except one. Mine. Empty. Waiting. I stepped forward, but as I reached for it, the chair slid back on its own and vanished. No one noticed. They kept eating, laughing, clinking glasses like my absence was a decorative choice. When I woke up, my chest ached in that familiar, dull way. The next morning, another voicemail. This one longer. More effort. Still no apology. Then came a photo. The house. Blurry. Like a postcard sent by mistake. I deleted it without opening. If nostalgia was their weapon, they'd chosen the wrong battlefield. Curiosity, however, has teeth. By midweek, the unanswered messages stacked up like unopened bills. My name kept lighting up my screen like a dare. Finally, one message broke the pattern. "We should talk. Just an hour." An hour. As if time was the only thing they'd ever taken from me. I stared at it longer than I meant to. I wasn't tempted by reconciliation. That fantasy had died a long time ago. But answers? Those still mattered. I needed to know what had shifted so suddenly. What hole they were trying to plug with my name. So I agreed. Public place. Neutral territory. Strict limit. I even typed it out like a contract. 1 hour. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and burnt nerves. I arrived early on purpose. Sat where I could see the door. Old habits die hard. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Smaller. Grayer. Folded in on himself like someone who'd been carrying the wrong weight for too long. He hesitated when he saw me, smile wobbling before settling into something polite and strained. "You look good," he said, sitting across from me. I didn't return the compliment. He ordered coffee. I didn't. We sat there in the kind of silence that tries to guilt you into speaking first. "It's been a while," he finally said. I raised an eyebrow. That's one way to describe it. He winced, but kept going. Talked about the house. About how things had been busy. About how no one knew how to reach me. I let him talk. People reveal a lot when you don't interrupt. "We thought you were staying with friends," he added quickly. "Then time just got away from us." Time. Right. Then he said the thing that snapped everything into focus. "There's been a lot going on. Your grandmother passed." There it was. Not grief. Not remorse. A situation. They didn't miss me. They needed me. Something about family optics. About reconnecting. About keeping things together. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady now, certainty locking into place. "I'm sorry about her," I said quietly. "But I'm not the person you call to fix things anymore." His mouth opened, already reaching for a rehearsed line. I stood before he could use it. "You didn't look for me when I left," I said calmly. "You didn't ask if I was okay. So no, I'm not here for closure. I'm here to say I'm done." The chair scraped loudly as I pushed it back. I walked out before he could answer. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a reset. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. We should have handled things differently. Still no apology. Just implication. An hour later, a message from my sister. "Dad's hurt. You didn't have to be so cold." Cold. I laughed, really laughed this time. I'd spent my entire childhood on fire trying to keep that family warm. I wasn't cold. I was finished. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying and wonderful. They couldn't pull me back. But they weren't done trying. The quiet after my message felt suspicious. No immediate reply. No dramatic counterattack. No guilt-laced voicemail delivered at dawn. Just nothing. At first, that silence almost fooled me into thinking it was over. That they'd finally understood boundaries weren't suggestions. That maybe, just maybe, they'd accepted I wasn't their missing puzzle piece anymore. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th morning, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. I glanced at the screen, toothpaste foaming at the corner of my mouth, and felt my stomach drop. A number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. It rang again. Then again. I spat into the sink, wiped my mouth, and answered, because something in my bones told me this wasn't accidental. "Hello." A pause. Then a woman's voice, too polished, too practiced. "Is this Mara Vale?" I hated how easily she said my name, like it belonged to her. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "This is Ms. Caldwell. I'm calling regarding a family matter." Of course she was. My grip tightened on the phone. "You'll need to be more specific." Another pause. Papers shifting. The sound of someone who enjoyed control. "There's been a recent development involving your grandmother's estate," she said. "Your presence is relevant." Relevant. Not wanted. Not missed. Relevant. That single word flipped a switch inside me. "I'm not involved in family matters," I said evenly. "You should contact my parents." Silence stretched. Then. "We already did." Of course they had. And I asked. "They suggested you might be difficult." I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound echoed too loudly in the small bathroom. "That's generous of them," I said. "Good luck." I hung up before she could respond. I stood there for a moment, staring at my reflection. Hair damp, eyes sharp, something feral peeking through. So that was it. Legal. Official. Whatever they wanted, it was big enough to drag strangers into it. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my futon listening to the heater tick and groan like it was working through its own demons. Evan's guitar hummed softly through the wall. A low comfort I didn't fully absorb. My brain wouldn't stop assembling pieces. A sudden call after years. Urgency without apology. A lawyer who spoke like I was leverage. I didn't want to know. But I needed to. The next day, during a lull at the library, I did something I'd sworn I wouldn't. I searched public records. It didn't take long. I learned two things very quickly. First, my grandmother's property wasn't small. Second, my name appeared in places it absolutely shouldn't have. Buried in scanned documents and legal jargon was a clause that made my pulse spike. A contingency. A requirement. A missing signature. Me. They hadn't remembered me. They'd found me. When I told Eli that evening, we sat on the fire escape wrapped in coats, city lights blinking below like an audience that didn't care. They can't force you, he said calmly. I know, I replied. That's not what scares me. What does? That they're pretending this is about family. I looked at my hands, fingers curled tight. They still don't see me, I continued. They see an obstacle. Eli was quiet for a moment. Then, so what are you going to do? I smiled slow and sharp. I'm going to let them think I don't know anything. 2 days later, my father texted again. We really need to talk. It's important. I replied with a single word. Why? The response came almost instantly. It's complicated. I stared at the screen. Then typed. Try. Dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. There are things you need to sign. There it was. I laughed softly, adrenaline humming under my skin. I don't sign things I don't understand, I replied. Send everything. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not empty. Afraid. That weekend, another message arrived, this one from my sister. Can we meet? Just us. I hesitated. She'd always been the golden one. The untouchable. The version of a daughter they'd chosen. But something about her message felt off. Too careful. Too polite. Curiosity won again. We met in a crowded cafe, the kind with loud music and no privacy. She looked polished, tense, like someone holding together a smile with sheer force of will. You didn't have to drag lawyers into this, she said the moment we sat. I blinked. I didn't. Her face flickered. Oh. So they hadn't told her everything. Interesting. They're panicking, she admitted quietly. Things aren't clean. I leaned back, folding my arms. You're going to need to be clearer. She swallowed. They need you to cooperate. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Tell them, I said, that they should have noticed me before I became inconvenient. Her mouth opened. Closed. For once, she didn't have a reply. Walking home later, the city felt sharper. Louder. Alive with possibility. They'd spent my entire childhood pretending I didn't exist. Now, they needed me. And I could finally decide how visible I wanted to be. Once you realize people don't miss you. They miss what you control. Everything becomes very clear. I didn't answer their next 3 messages. Not because I didn't have time. Because silence used correctly is devastating. By day 3, the calls escalated. Not just my father anymore. Unknown numbers. Blocked numbers. Even a voicemail from someone who sounded suspiciously like a family advisor. Which is just lawyer adjacent enough to be threatening without saying so. I let them stack up. Instead, I did something far more dangerous. I read every document. Every clause. Every footnote buried in language designed to make people feel small and stupid, so they'll just sign and move on. That's how they expected this to go. They forgot something important. I grew up invisible. Invisibility teaches patience. And patience teaches you how to wait until someone exposes themselves. The estate wasn't the issue. Control was. My grandmother had been precise. Meticulous. She'd left contingencies for contingencies. And tucked inside all of it was a simple, brutal truth. Nothing could move forward without me. Not the property. Not the accounts. Not the public image my parents were so desperate to preserve. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted my signature. Evan noticed the shift before I said anything. You've got that look, he said one night, leaning against the counter while I poured instant noodles into boiling water. What look? The one people get right before they stop being polite. I smiled. I've been polite my whole life. That weekend, I sent one message. I'll meet. On my terms. The response was immediate. Too immediate. They agreed to everything. Public place. Witnesses nearby. No paperwork unless I requested it. Desperation makes people sloppy. The room they chose was neutral in theory. In reality, it reeked of performance. A private conference space borrowed from someone with connections. Coffee served in matching mugs. Everyone dressed like grief had a dress code. My mother looked at me like she was seeing a ghost she wasn't sure she was allowed to acknowledge. My father tried to smile. My sister avoided my eyes. And then there was the lawyer. The same polished woman from the phone call. She nodded at me like we were colleagues. That annoyed me more than anything. We sat. They spoke. I listened. They talked about family legacy. About honoring intentions. About how proud my grandmother would have been. I waited. Finally, I leaned forward and placed my hands flat on the table. Before we go any further, I said calmly, I need something clarified. The room stilled. You didn't look for me when I left, I continued. You didn't call. You didn't text. You didn't ask if I was alive. My mother's mouth trembled. My father looked at the table. So tell me, I said evenly. When exactly did I become important again? Silence slammed into the room. The lawyer cleared her throat. This meeting is about. No. Interrupta gently. This meeting is about honesty. I turned to my parents. You don't want me back, I said. You want compliance. My father tried to recover. That's not fair. I tilted my head. Neither was being forgotten. No one argued that. That was the moment I knew. They had no moral high ground left. I'm not signing anything today, I said, standing. And I won't sign anything ever unless it benefits me. My sister finally looked up. You'd really do this? I met her gaze steadily. You did it first. You just didn't know it yet. Outside, my hands shook. Not from fear. From adrenaline. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't cried. I hadn't begged. I'd simply refused to disappear. The aftermath was chaos. Voicemails turned sharp. Messages turned manipulative. Guilt was served in generous portions. I ignored all of it. Instead, I focused on my life. Classes. Work. Quiet dinners with Evan. Late walks with Eli where the city lights blurred. And the world felt manageable again. One night, sitting on the fire escape, I finally said the thing I hadn't admitted out loud. I think they're scared. Eli nodded. People usually are when they lose control. I exhaled slowly. I never planned revenge. He smiled faintly. You don't need to. Living well is disruptive enough. A week later, the final message arrived. Not pleading. Not commanding. Negotiating. They'd realized something crucial. They needed me more than I needed them. And for the first time in my life, the power was where it belonged. With me. The final offer arrived on a Tuesday morning. No greeting. No pleasantries. Just a document attached to an email titled, Revised Proposal. That told me everything. When people stop pretending, they usually mean business. I didn't open it right away. I finished my coffee, answered a few emails, walked to class, sat through a lecture I barely absorbed. I let the file sit there, unopened, like a loaded question. Control, I'd learned, isn't about shouting. It's about timing. That night, I sat at my desk, the city humming softly outside the window, and finally clicked open the document. They were offering me money. Not apology money. Not repair money. Hush money. A clean cut. A payout in exchange for cooperation and silence. Sign, disappear again, and let them move forward without disruption. I laughed. Not because it was insulting, though it was, but because it was predictable. They still thought the problem was me. They still didn't understand. I wasn't asking for compensation. I was done negotiating my worth. I drafted my response carefully. Not angry. Not emotional. Unmistakable. I won't be signing anything. I won't be contesting anything either. I want no role in this process now or in the future. Do not contact me again. Short. Final. Unappealable. I read it twice. Then I hit send. The silence that followed wasn't immediate. First came the panic. Calls. Messages. A voicemail that cracked halfway through. My father's voice suddenly brittle, no script left to read from. "Please," he said. "You don't understand what this could do." I did understand. Perfectly. It could do exactly what I wanted. Force them to face the consequences of forgetting me. I didn't respond. Days passed. Then weeks. The messages stopped. Not because they'd forgiven me. Because they'd run out of moves. The estate stalled. The situation became complicated. Lawyers circled. Tensions rose. People whispered. And for once, none of it was my problem. The strange thing was, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Life settled back into its rhythm. Morning coffee. Work shifts. Classes. Quiet evenings. Evan kept leaving notes on the fridge like, "Reminder. You're doing great even when you don't feel like it." Eli walked me home most nights, our shoulders brushing in that easy way that didn't demand anything. One evening, sitting on the fire escape, he asked softly, "Do you regret it?" I thought about it. The years of silence. The birthdays forgotten. The house I left without a goodbye. "No," I said. "I regret how long I waited to stop explaining myself." He smiled. "That's growth." A month later, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel haunted anymore. No phantom chair at the table. No imaginary conversations on bus rides. No ache when I pass families laughing too loudly in public. I realized something subtle had shifted. They no longer occupied space in my mind. They'd gone quiet. And this time, the silence wasn't theirs. It was mine. One evening, scrolling absent-mindedly, I saw a photo drift across my feed. Another family gathering. Another carefully framed moment of togetherness. Smiles polished. Arms linked. Everyone present. Except me. And for the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt free. Because I finally understood something that took me years to learn. You don't win by being invited back to tables where you were never truly welcome. You win by building your own. That night, I stood by the window of my apartment, city lights scattered below like a map I'd drawn myself. The heater ticked its steady rhythm. From the next room came the soft sound of Evan's guitar. Somewhere down the block, Eli laughed. My phone was quiet. No calls. No messages. No ghosts. And for the first time in my life, that quiet didn't feel like absence. It felt like ownership. I hadn't been lost. I hadn't been forgotten. I had simply stopped waiting to be chosen. And that changed everything. Please click the subscribe button, like, share, and comment. This will encourage me to make more interesting stories. Also, let's know where you are watching from. Thank you and see you in the next story.